Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name's Marta and I am the chef and author of Sense and Edibility, a site where I teach you everything I know about cooking, baking, and cocktail making. I apologize for this. Let's just pretend like this is not the first video that I've done in many months. Life has gotten in the way. I'm sure many of you can relate to life getting in the way, but here I am. And in today's video, I want to teach you how I make my flaky pie dough from scratch. Flaky pie dough. How is that different from pie dough? It's flaky. It's in the name. We make it in a way that causes it to be flakier than regular pie dough, which I will show you how to make as well. Before we get into how I make my flaky pie dough and how you can make flaky pie dough, I would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button, and also sign up for notifications so that you can get notified every time I post a new video like this one. In the meantime, let me show you how I make my flaky pie dough recipe. The first thing we are going to do is add 3.5 cups, which is 420 to 455 grams of all-purpose flour, depending on what brand you're using, to a large mixing bowl. And to this bowl of flour, we're going to add 1 teaspoon, which is 6 grams of kosher salt. And instead of sifting this flour, which is something I usually recommend, I'm just going to take a whisk and use it to break up the large clumps of flour in the bowl. Now we're going to take ice cold unsalted butter straight from the refrigerator, and we're going to use the large holes of a grater to grate the butter into the flour in the bowl. Grating your flour helps you cut it in a lot easier than if you were to dice it. Now, once you've grated all your flour, make sure you grated all your butter. Make sure you take that butter, all of it, and get it into the bowl because you paid a lot of money for that butter. In addition to ice cold butter, we're going to use ice cold butter shortening. This is something I actually freeze for about 15 minutes before I start the recipe. And to cut the fat into the flour, we're going to use the show me the money. Like we're going to rub our fingers and thumbs together like show me the money. Because what we want to do is break up large clumps of fat like this into the flour. This is called cutting the fat into the flour. And what this does is it encapsulates the fat in the flour, which leads to a lighter, flakier dough later on when we go to roll it out and bake it. Your flour should look like a course meal when you're done with it. Now this is cold water that has ice in it. So it is super cold ice water. And I'm going to add a cup of water. You may only need 3/4 of a cup of water, but I'm using the full amount, the full 1 cup, because it's been dry here. And what I'm doing is taking my curved hand and I'm scooping the water into the flour mixture, and then I'm going to start squeezing it once the flour starts to hydrate with that liquid. And I'm going to do a rudimentary lamination of this dough. That just means I'm folding over the dough. I'm trying to create layers of dough and fat. I'm taking now a bench scraper and I'm using that to form a really rudimentary rectangle. And I'm going to take that rectangle and cut it in half in equal parts. And then I'm going to take the dough and form it into a ball. And from there, I'm going to form that ball into a disc. Once I form this ball into a disc, I'm going to transfer it over to the side, and I'm going to repeat the process with the second half of dough, just forming it into a rough ball and flattening it into a really rudimentary disc. I love using that word, rudimentary. Now I'm going to grab a piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to wrap both of these discs of dough in this plastic wrap. This is just a single layer of plastic wrap. Once I've wrapped it in the plastic, I'm going to do what I call this is called like the holiday pounds pinch. I'm just forming it into a flatter disc. And what this does later on when I go to roll out this chilled, hydrated dough, it creates a thinner, more round disc that makes it easier for rolling out a circle of dough. In the meantime, I'm going to put both discs of dough into a freezer storage bag. This is thicker than a regular storage bag, but you can use a food storage bag for this. I'm going to seal it, and then I'm going to press out the air and put this into the refrigerator for 30 minutes before I even begin working with it. Eventually, your dough is going to roll out nice and pretty, just like this. So let's answer some questions. Okay, so that's how simple it is to make flaky pie dough from scratch. Now what I want to do is answer some frequently asked questions I get about this flaky pie dough recipe on my site. I'm not going to show you how to make anything with this pie dough right now because it's pointless. I mean, all I'm going to end up doing is rolling it out and putting it in a pie plate and wasting it. So I am going to link to and start a playlist of recipes that you can use this flaky pie dough in. You can use any pie dough, but especially this flaky pie dough, to make pies. But certain types of pies that have cooked fruit fillings or custard fillings, you can use this for a chicken pot pie or a turkey pot pie, especially with the holidays coming up. You can use this as a tart dough, turnovers, Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarts are good. Any pie that doesn't have a super wet filling. So I'm talking things like creme brulee, sweet potato, or pumpkin. Don't use this pie dough for those. I have another recipe that I'm going to link to and create for that. So just be patient. But for this, apple pie, cherry pie, lemon meringue pie, yes, lemon meringue pie, a coquito pie, which I have on my site. Anything you want a flaky pie dough, a pie crust for, you should use this pie dough recipe for. It's been a long time since I made a video and it's obvious. I'm sorry. That's what you use this pie dough for. You can also use this recipe for your cobblers because this makes a great topping for cobblers. Yay! This recipe will make a 9 or 10 inch pie. You could use it to make 2 9 or 10 inch single crust pies. That means the crust is only on the bottom. You can make 2 of them with just one recipe because you're using a single crust. Or you can make 9 or 10 inch double crust pie to a top and a bottom crust. You can use that for. But yes, this makes one batch, one recipe. You can get 2 9 or 10 inch single crust pies or 1 9 or 10 inch double crust pie. You can double or triple this recipe if you're baking for the holidays, which I strongly, highly encourage. You can make this recipe, wrap it just like I've wrapped it in plastic film, put it in a freezer, in the freezer bag that I showed you in the video, and freeze it for 2 to 3 months. I usually freeze it for only 2 months because we like pie. So I'm always going through pie dough. I always have pie dough in the freezer because I'm about that life. I'm about that pie life. Make bulk. And the holidays are coming up, so it can't hurt to have some pie dough laying around, right? The best types of flours to use whenever you're making pie dough is all-purpose flour. If you're in Europe, it's often called pastry flour. It has a middle-of-the-road protein content, which means that it won't develop too much gluten so that your pie dough is tough and shrinks, but it has enough gluten to keep your pie dough together. So if you were to use something like cake flour, which has a lower protein content, your pie dough, it's going to have a weaker structure. Whereas if you use bread flour, which has a higher protein content, you're going to fight with it because you've developed so much gluten with the kneading and with the rolling out process that it may or may not shrink in the pie plate. All-purpose flour is perfect for this recipe. It's what I recommend. If you want to make a gluten-free pie dough, you're going to have to use a 1-to-1 baking flour that is gluten-free. And I'm sure if you're gluten-free, you already have one that you love. Try to mimic the gluten by kneading it a little bit more. I would knead it for about 1 to 2 minutes longer than normal, just to kind of like build up whatever protein strands you can build up with the flour that you're using. So yes, you can make this gluten-free. Just use your favorite 1-to-1 baking flour for it. The reason why I reiterate using cold ingredients is because, and this is so fun for me to explain because I'm a baking nerd. When you have very cold ingredients and you add them to your dough and you have a very cold dough, you roll it out, you form it, you put it in a very hot oven. What happens is the moisture in those cold ingredients evaporates. They go poof, like that, right? And in its place leaves pockets of air, which translates to flakiness. And that's why we call this a flaky pie dough. So if you were to use room temperature butter or shortening or water, you're basically going to create a very gummy dough. And when that gets into the oven, the already warm fats are just going to become even more warm. They're going to kind of go gooey and soggy, and you're going to create an oily pie dough, which is just not, nobody goes home from Thanksgiving dinner and says, remember that really soggy, oily pie crust that we ate at so-and-so's house? Nobody does that. People always talk about the super flaky pie crust that they had at your house. And they will talk about the super flaky pie dough that you had at your house because you're going to follow these instructions and you're going to use very cold ingredients. I use shortening because it cuts the temperamental butter. Butter it's like me when I got an attitude. If your environment is too hot, it's going to melt. If it's too cold, it's going to be too firm to work with. So shortening kind of cuts the butter and makes the butter more, people friendly and social. So that's why I use shortening. If you want an all butter pie crust, you can totally replace the shortening in this recipe with butter. Just know that you're going to have to let it come to room temperature for about 10 minutes before you start working with it, because butter just naturally firms up when it's cold. You're also going to have to chill the pie crust frequently during the process of making it up. And when I say make up, I mean forming it, rolling it, filling it, doing all that stuff, so that you can continue to keep that butter cold. Because remember, we want that quick evaporation to happen in the oven to create those flaky layers. So you can omit the shortening, replace it with butter. Just be prepared to be finicky, because butter's finicky, but that's okay because butter is tasty. If you are making this pie dough specifically for savory dishes, quiche, pot pies, savory Pop-Tarts, or something like that, you can actually replace the shortening with lard if you don't abstain from pork products. But they also make beef lard, and they make leaf lard and all kinds of lard. So you can replace it with lard and it will have the same effect as using shortening. You can also replace the butter shortening with just regular plain vegetable shortening. I like tasting butter, even if it's fake, so I will use butter shortening all the time. Troubleshoot. Let's troubleshoot some stuff. You're rolling out your dough. It keeps shrinking back on you. The reason why it keeps shrinking back on you is because you overwork the dough, either during mixing, rolling, or somewhere. How to mitigate that is to leave it alone. Wrap it back up, put it back in the fridge, let the gluten strands relax. It will stop shrinking on you. Dough that is too soggy or comes out too oily, wasn't cold enough when it went into the oven. In the future, make sure you take the time to chill your dough. Chill the dough, okay? I know it sounds like I'm asking a lot of you, but it's not really, because if you want an excellent pie, you have to put forth the effort. Once you've formed your pie, filled your pie, made it look all pretty, put it in the fridge for 20-30 minutes before baking it. There's a catch. If you are baking your pie in a ceramic or glass pie dish, You want to let it warm up to room temperature for about 10 minutes before you put it in the oven. Because if you put an ice cold ceramic or glass dish in a hot oven, it may shatter. And by may, I mean 90% probability it will. Because they don't make stuff like they used to. If you're using a metal or a disposable pie tin, put it right into the oven because you're good. You will know that your dough, you added too much water to your dough if it sticks. If it sticks crazily. Just add more flour. You can knead more flour in, but you have to let the dough relax after you knead in that flour because what did you create? Gluten strands. What do gluten strands do? Shrink your dough. Put it in the fridge after you've added the proper amount of flour to kind of dry it up. Wrap it, put it in the fridge, let it chill for 30 minutes before you start working with it. On the flip side, you didn't add enough water. Be patient because if you see maybe like a tablespoon of loose flour at the bottom of the bowl or on the countertop when you're kneading it, still gather it together. Try to form it into a ball as best you can. Wrap it in the plastic wrap and let it relax for 30 minutes because you have to remember flour absorbs moisture. What you see right after mixing the dough is not what's going to happen after it has sat and hydrated in the refrigerator. So the possibility is you could end up with perfect dough. But if you add too much water to begin with, you see what I'm saying? Like give it time to absorb. And then if you notice that it's still a little bit too dry, you can drop ice water onto the dough as you're, kneading it. Put it back in the fridge, let it chill for a little bit. But if you follow the instructions, then you should be good to go. If you are making pie dough on a very humid day, like it's raining, it's just humid, the likelihood of you needing less water is high because there's already moisture in the air. Baking is a science. If there's tons of moisture in the air, it's going to affect your dough. So just be patient with it. Learn to read the dough. If it looks just a little bit, powdery, give it a moment, let it chill in the fridge, let it hydrate, see what happens. But if it's just like not coming together to form a dough, add more water to it, tablespoon at a time, up to a quarter cup more. So I hope that helps with that. Try to figure what other ways we can troubleshoot this. That's pretty much it. You can store your dough wrapped like this, and I always put it in a freezer safe storage bag. I always use freezer safe because it's thicker. For 2 to 3 days, 4 days tops. What happens is the longer your dough sits in the refrigerator, it continues to hydrate, but that flour starts to turn gray because that's just what flour does. It's just absorbing all that moisture, and it's going to turn gray and it's going to look funky and the butter is going to start smelling funky. So use it within 3 to 4 days of making it tops. If you're not going to use it within 3 to 4 days, take it out of the fridge, put it in the freezer, freeze it for 2 to 3 months, and you'll be good to go. When you're ready to use it, take it out of the freezer, put it in the fridge, let it thaw overnight, 12 hours, maybe even 24 hours, and then you can work with it as normal. Now, when it comes straight from the fridge, and you'll see this when I start doing my pie videos, when it comes straight from the fridge, it's going to be hard. So you can kind of do this number, not that, but do this number. I call this pinching the holiday fat. So you pinch it and you kind of loosen it up, you warm it up, and you get it ready to roll. And then you roll it. Use flour when you're rolling out your dough, but you're going to learn all that when we're making our pies. So I won't waste your time with that. So this is how I make my flaky pie dough for all the pies that I use that I want flaky pie dough in or on or under. I do hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up below. Mind you, the entire recipe with measurements is written down below in the description box. You just got to click see more and it'll show you everything that you need to go buy at the grocery store. The full recipe with all my troubleshooting tips, all the pretty pictures, is on my website, senseandedibility.com. I'm going to link to that down below, along with all the tools that I use to make this pie dough, with the exception of my mom's grater, because that thing is like 40 years old and you probably won't be able to find it. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them down below in the comment section. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, especially if they're in charge of making the desserts for the holiday season, because you don't want no ratchet, like gross, nasty pie dough. You want this pie dough, okay? I will see you on the next video. So until then, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and sign up for notifications for my channel. And oh, and don't forget to watch for outtakes, because I have them. I know I do. I always do. Okay, bye. Flaky pie dough from scratch, because why would we make flaky pie dough from the store? We wouldn't. Calzone. No, not calzones, because calzone, no. All the Italians just kind of like gasp. I heard them. What else? Like tartlets. I kind of feel like that's tarts, and I kind of feel like I'm pushing it. So make a lot. Make a double batch, triple batch, whatever batch. Middle of the road gluten content, gluten percentage, no. Percentage of gluten, protein, gluten protein. What? Protein. It has a middle of the road protein content. 1-to-1 gluten-free baking powder. Baking flour for it.